Very good afternoon. Welcome to the reality shift. This is another episode, and this episode is on black women wearing weaves and makeup. And yesterday, I was in a conversation, and the question was put forward to me. You as a black man, what is your opinion on black women wearing weaves and makeup? And for me, I have such a strong opinion on this. So much so that women have been hostile and have been rubbed the wrong way by what I've said, because they took it as an attack on their character and value as a person, rather than attack on the archetype of the standard of beauty, the colonial standard of beauty. And my opinion was very simple. As a black man, I was like, why do black women wear weaves and makeup, per se? And although it wasn't the whole picture, I'm just going to give you just what my sentiments were. I said it's because of the colonial system and conditioning, right, of the Caucasian standard of beauty, right, that has been ingrained into collective consciousness and has been policified. And it's a form of current institutional racism, institutional prejudice, and that in itself, that systematic and continuous renewal of that standard creates self-hate. And self-hate and loving self can simultaneously coexist with one another. You can still love yourself and be completely in love with yourself with the weave, right? But the question is, do you love yourself the same way when you don't have one? And that is where the question comes. If you don't, you must understand that that roots from self-hate. And it also roots from not giving the opportunity to this particular archetype of woman to explore their natural beauty. All right? So that was a question that was put forward to me. And I got wonderful educational information from the wonderful human beings that participated in this. And the things that came up were TV, friends, school systems, and then exposure. We have male influences, and exposure once again. So I'm just going to go through all of that. So friends, of course, psychological mirroring and wanting to be like and exist in the same and feel kinship in with your friends. TV in terms of representation. So you're seeing this representation of self, right? And this is what self, all these persons feel and how they represent themselves. And that's how you feel as if you're supposed to represent yourself. And then school systems. So it was very interesting having this conversation. A phenomenal being was telling me about how, in private schools, and the various persons attested to this, and how in high school they said that black women, young girls, they wouldn't allow them to wear their natural hair. They had to straighten it or tie it up. And that in itself was marginalization, oppression, policies that infringed on the authenticity of one's blackness, per se. the African beauty. And it was very interesting to hear that. And she was saying how only after high school was she able to come into her own and explore and experience self within that dynamic of being her authentic self. And that was very interesting to me. And of course, over the years, and because of Black Lives Matter, this it has put these kind of matters to the forefront, and conversation has been sparked because of it. Um, and yeah, then exposure, male influences. My cousin was talking to me about how, because now male influences, they'll um, and how they certain males say that, oh no, you look beautiful with like long hair or braids or whatever it is, or this kind of style or this kind of that. That influenced her behavior, even though she wanted to be natural, but she found herself trying to please someone else instead of being authentic and true to herself. And at the same time, when she was being herself, other persons, even her friends and around her, were saying like, "Why are you doing that? Why are you natural? Why are you doing that? You're not. You don't look beautiful. You don't look this, that, and the other." And then, of course, comes to my core um, reason is the colonial white standard of beauty, the system that I've been propagated to exist in collective consciousness, that having long hair is the stamp for beauty. Um, and what has happened, it has allowed black women, because the archetype of beauty was modeled on the white standard of beauty. So what black women tried to do was mold their own version of that archetype within that, with that standard of beauty, right? Hence, let's just say braids, for example, right? Because and I was also here, and it also relates to institutional racism and prejudice, which I'm going to get to a bit later on. But so the conditioning, it was interesting. Another phenomenal lady was telling me about how when she grew up, she was conditioned and told that she had to relax her hair. Every time it grew, she had to relax her hair, her core hair growth, if I'm not mistaken, the correct uh, um, thing about it. And yeah, another thing that I was also told was that it's not necessarily about self-hate. It's also about like changing it up and, you know, loving to express yourself in different kinds of ways and that kind of thing. So that was interesting in that regard. Also, another thing is socio-economical influences, social class and exposure that one is exposed to. And different levels of social classes has different degrees of consciousness and understanding of beauty. And so that's also a major influence. So now institutional racism and prejudice. And she was telling me how she was employed at a particular company, teaching company, and they told her that she had to relax her hair or change her natural hair to braids because their clients weren't used to seeing black women in their natural, authentic selves. And I was like, so you telling me to erode my sense of self to please someone else because they're not used to seeing? That it makes absolutely no sense. It doesn't matter whether you have long hair, short hair, or brown hair. People understand, okay, can you not see this is a human being? Of course, this is a fucking human being. Excuse my language. But then that was the narrative that was going through my head. And she was talking about how specifically was talking about, she was doing some teaching thing for Asian communities, and how Asian communities weren't used to seeing black women without, or just that particular form of a woman without long hair. And it just made me think of the collective consciousness of that white standard of beauty and the policies that infringe upon the authenticity of the black woman, because now it's seen as as what is the word, uncivilized, to have hair that is naturally molded to the form of an African black woman, right? And that was just something that I was in awe of. I was like, still today, and in this day and age, that's still happening. Um, so yeah, and another thing as well was, another person was telling me how you bombarded with so much layers and this propagated standard of beauty in all its forms, that there's not enough exposure, that you have to constantly renew your mind and tell yourself, I love myself, I love myself, and I love myself as I am, and as I am, I want to, etc., etc. So you have to constantly renew your mind, because you're not seeing uh, uh, someone who looks like you consistently, that represents you and who you are, you and who you want to be. And it is hard. It is hard, and I've heard a lot of talks, even on radio, saying that it was hard for women to transition cognitively from putting weaves, especially straight hair weaves, to braids, and more so back to their natural state, because now everything has been molded on the white standard of beauty, that the black standard of beauty hadn't had any time to develop and to figure out its own styles and its own uh, beauties, etc., etc. Although currently now there's a lot of transformation, there's a lot of reclaiming of power, and a lot of acceptance of self, there's still um, a lot of resistance in a way, um, in terms of big corporate and marketing and etc., etc. Um, so yeah, and then there was also this uh, information that I was given, that also weaves, also sometimes weave, a woman put on weaves, black women put on weaves as well, because certain type of styles allow them to grow their hair out, um, etc., etc. Um, And so the conclusion was, that I got from all of that information after making my statement, was that it's not all about self-hate or love, or self-hate, or but it's multi-layered and it's multi-dimensional. Oh geez. Um, so yeah, I think so. After getting all of that information, my question was to the black female population, and this will root out whether or not um, what you're doing is rooted out of conditioning, and that conditioning in itself is self-hate, even if you love yourself, right? So I say, if you were to take pictures of yourself in your natural states and in your natural beauty, in your natural styles, and also the white standard of beauty with long hair and those type of styles, and you were to compare the two, right? And if you yourself find yourself liking the white standard of beauty, you must understand that's rooted in self-hate and colonial systems to propagate that narrative, right? You must understand that, and you have to get that in here and be like, why? Okay, is that, you know? And then instead of overriding oneself and saying, okay, yeah, I like changing and all of, different styles, and I get that, but it's also introspectively and internally and saying, okay, making that comparison, and then you'll be able to root that out in mind. The dissidence, that's where it is. Okay, so ask yourself, which one do you prefer, and that will give you the answer. And I said, yeah, and it's not a form of not loving yourself. It's a discrimination against your true and authentic self, because now you've been conditioned to like a certain way of being when you haven't experienced and fully understood and developed your standard and your uh, a form of beauty, and given it its own time to flourish, and given yourself and your minds its own time to love that authentic self. Um, so yeah, that's basically what I have to say on this topic. And yeah, please like, comment, subscribe, and share. Please follow me at the Reality Shift Essay on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And yeah, please do engage. I'd really appreciate it. I'm out.